Hi there, welcome back to another video from the Dark Alley system. My name is Avaria and I'm the system's primary host, and I have she/her pronouns. I am age slider between 4 to 18, and I am the author in my system that presents with the most autistic traits. I am the lowest masking author in that context. So today is part 2 of what is DID. And if you haven't watched part 1 of this video, do check out the link. We will be providing it somewhere, either in the description below or somewhere. Alright, let's start with our next section. So this section we're going to talk about day-to-day life. The first thing I want to talk about is amnesia and how it affects us daily. So one of the stories that I can think about at the top of my head is when I was preparing my morning coffee. So I poured the coffee powder, boiled the water, and I was mixing in a cup. And by the time I finished mixing it, I feel like my vision kind of blended in, is like distorted, as if like somebody hit me at the back of my head. And the next thing I knew, my cup is empty. Like somebody drank from it, and there's this aftertaste of coffee in my mouth. And when I looked at my watch, I apparently skipped like about 15 minutes. So in DID discovery and our journey along it, I've discovered that that is because somebody else in the system actually stole my coffee. They fronted and drank my coffee after I made it, and I switched back to front. And later on we settled that by communicating with their author that, hey, you know what, if you like coffee, we could front together, we could try doing that, and we could share the coffee. Don't just kick me out of front like that. So the other segment in day-to-day life is how we collaborate as a system, and this is in line with my next point from splitting job roles. My system have made up a content page regarding how to do this video, but I'm gonna join these 2 points together. So each of us have different system roles. Aside from primary host, prime protector, blah blah blah, but we have different things in life that we would do separate to each other. So for example, I'll take on most of the socializing because I'm the primary host, and I will take on most of the gaming life of the system. Sage would involve, Sage is our prime protector. They did the video in the part 1 of this video. They would come to the front for things that requires our immediate attention, be it danger, or be it like our financial situation is bad and none of us could bring ourselves to work, and Sage would come to the front really quickly and take control and prep us for work really quickly. Sage is really fast and settle everything. Or if say a friend was dangerous to us, like just not being a good friend in a dangerous way, Sage will come to the front and put up boundaries. So we have another author, her name is Charlotte. She's a sexual author, so she is in charge of the body stuff, and aside from that, she's also in charge of grooming the body. And yeah, so that's how we collaborate and split job roles. The next segment I'd like to talk about is choice conflicts. So at the top of our head, we I do have this active conflict that we have. So Sarah, our secondary host, who was the previous primary host, which is why our legal name is Sarah, she wants to be a DID therapist, and we do have some credentials that helps us towards that, just that there are additional steps we need to take in order to actually fully secure that position, that job role. And myself as Avaria, I would want to be in a job where I could directly interact and serve other autistic people, or basically other people who have invisible disabilities, because that's where my passion lies in, me as an author. And we have another author, they don't have a name yet, and we call them photography author. And they want to be a full-time photographer because they're really good at it. They actually own a Canon T90, so it's only manual focus because autofocus wasn't invented back then. It's also a film camera, and they are really good at, photography. So in the topic of choice conflicts, see, what's presented here is already 3 different job aspirations. How do we decide on what we want to do? Because we want to move away from limousine driving, but we haven't really come to a conclusion yet on what our next job would be, and that would be an example of what a choice conflict is. So the next segment, I'll talk about social difficulties revolving around amnesia. So say I met a friend at a restaurant, and they do not know that we have DID. And the next time I meet the friend again, and we walked past this restaurant, and then the friend goes like, "Hey, remember that day we were at the restaurant? I told you something, blah blah blah. Can you remember it?" And I'm like, "What? We ate at this restaurant before? I don't remember that." And if the person doesn't know we have DID, it could draw some strange looks, or maybe some words of concern like, "Hey, are you okay? You hit your head or something." So it could be really difficult, especially if you're not out as a DID system. And this same problem can also happen, especially when you're a different author meeting that same friend. So switching can be a problem, if the other person doesn't know that you have DID. So for us personally, we prefer to be open about being a system, because it takes way more brain power to just pretend that we're singular, or a singlet, and have to come up with a whole bunch of lies just to cover up for whatever just happened. And then you get the problem where one lie would need another lie to cover, and then it just worsens from there. So in this segment, we'll talk about interpersonal stuff regarding relationships, and by relationships I mean all sorts of relationships, be it business relationships, platonic relationships, or romantic relationships. And this is quite related to the last point I shared regarding amnesia and switching, because your preferences and your memories change around so much, which links to you having DID. And the person that you have a relationship with is not catching up. Like one moment you say, "Oh, you don't like beef," and then the next moment you get excited about beef, and the person will be like, "Don't you? I thought you did not like beef. Why are you liking beef now?" Or it could be, oh yeah, a better example, like if you're in a romantic relationship with your spouse, or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, one author could be fronting and say after some sit down and talk session, you agreed on some relationship stuff, some boundary thing, for example, and then a few days later is another author fronting, and the other author broke the boundary because they're not aware of that boundary in your relationship, and that could lead to a lot of relationship problems. So that's what I have to say about interpersonal stuff. The next point I'd like to talk about dormancy, dormant authors. So there has been a misconception going around somewhere, both in the plural community and amongst people who are not systems, that they think, oh, I've not seen this author for quite a while now. They probably have disappeared, or they're not around anymore. And what we believe is that is false, because every author is part of you, part of the whole you, part of the whole personality, if not for the condition. So based on that theory, you can't just drop out a part of you. It's not like you're a bottle of water where you could just pour some water out of the bottle. You're a human being, at least real body wise. So I believe that authors either fuse with another author, or that author has split into multiple different authors, usually under stress, or they are just dormant. They're just in headspace somewhere deep inside, in deep sleep, and usually for such cases it's because they are not needed around as much anymore, or for the time being. So authors do not just disappear. They either fuse, split, or go dormant. So if you're really hoping for a specific author to come to the front, whether it's you yourself as a system or somebody as a system, don't worry, that author is still there, somewhere, somehow. Right, so the next thing I want to talk about is triggers. I know there's a negative connotation when people say trigger, but trigger is a neutral term. If you think in terms of coding, there's a trigger for a certain script to execute, for example. It is trigger. It's neutral. So, but despite that, I do know there's a negative connotation to that. And with that said, I would like to bring to attention 3 types of triggers. That would be positive, neutral, and negative. So positive triggers could be anything that, say an author really likes, or an author is really drawn by, or an author's interest. So I have a favorite song, and if somebody wants to trigger me, Avaria, out, they would play my favorite song, and I would come to the front. It would pull me or draw me to the front, and that's a positive trigger. So regarding neutral trigger, I think at this point I can only think about, say, calling my name repeatedly, like Avaria, Avaria, Avaria. So it's neither positive nor neutral. Neither positive nor negative. So therefore it's neutral. The last type of trigger, negative trigger. For example, for me, Avaria, I am in charge of, making friends, making connections as a primary host. So I know there's going to be a vulnerable sharing, but since I know this is going to be on YouTube, I would know that people know this my negative trigger. So one of my negative triggers would be somebody making me feel like really, really bad. Like calling me useless or anything along those lines. And I hold feelings of depression. I'm actually also a depression holder. So if somebody were to make somebody else in my system feel that way, it will draw me to the front in the sense of a negative trigger so that I could tank the depression. And that is a negative trigger for me. It will pull me to the front. So if you're interacting the system, please pay attention to all the triggers, especially negative triggers. But even for positive triggers, do be careful. As mentioned in part 1 of our video, it is not okay to deliberately trigger another author out unless you have explicit permission by the system to do so. Even if it's positive, because another author may not be ready to front at that period of time. They maybe still be like inside of the headspace for a very specific reason. Right, so in this segment, we'll talk about myths and truth about DID. First one, myth number 1, people with DID are dangerous. I guess, at the top of my head, where this is coming from is probably from the movie Split, because Split is a bit of a violent-ish movie, and people like to think that, oh, that portrays DID. Well, admittedly, okay, we have watched Split, but admittedly, the actors are good, but we don't really like the scriptwriter because it's not a very accurate portrayal of DID. And just because you saw something on a movie and it portrays the person supposedly with DID as dangerous, does not mean that in the real world, DID is dangerous. In fact, the real truth is we are more likely to be dangerous towards ourselves than to the external world. The key phrase here is more likely. The next myth number 2, they are just role-playing. This is offensive on so many levels. A lot of us in the plural community, we oftentimes wish that we do not have DID. We are afraid and frightened about, oh, these are the voices in our head, and taking executive control of the body, let alone wanting to roleplay. That's the last in our mind. We are not pretending to be somebody else. Each of us are somebody else within the same body. And that is the truth. Please, we are not role-playing. We are not joking with this. Next point. Myth number 3. People with DID can't hold jobs. Now, if you were to interact with the plural community, people diagnosed with DID or OSDD, you will find that there's a good number of people with DID having a job, even if it's a basic one, be it working at the supermarket or, like us, we're just a private hire driver. Yes, having a condition can be difficult. So a good number of us are actually self-employed or freelance. And we do know of an system who goes around doing caregiving jobs, going to people's homes, like the elderly or the handicapped, to give home care to them. So that's a myth. People with DID can hold jobs. Just like anybody else, it's all about their individual capabilities. As a person, your condition may make it difficult, but the question is, what are the specifics? This goes hand in hand with, the same misconceptions with autism. Just like some people do think that autistic people can't work, and obviously that is false. It really depends on the individual. So next point, myth number 4. People with DID can't date. Again, similar to the job theory, it really depends on the individual, and in this case, individual system. So how healed or how organized is the DID system? Are they able to hold system responsibility or system accountability? Are they able to communicate with each other with regards to daily needs and needs of the relationship, or in this case, the romantic relationship? It's all up to the system. It's not that we can't date. Some people without DID can't date too because they're not mature enough. So this isn't I have DID, I cannot date, or the other way around. It just doesn't work like that. Last myth I want to bust, myth number 5. DID isn't real. The easiest way I can counter this is, if DID is in the DSM-5 and in the ICD, I believe now it's ICD-11, which are, each of these are compiled by professionals in the mental health sector. How dare you say DID isn't real when it is in mental health manuals and have diagnostic codes to it? For those of you who think DID isn't real, honestly speaking, you're not better than those mental health professionals, especially the ones who did all the research about DID. Right, so the next thing I want to talk about is terminology. I understand that different systems may have different terminology that they are, happy with, but these are the set of terminology that we use. The first one, integration versus fusion. Integration to us is about working together, and we picture it like, say a company is an integrative solutions provider, which means they work with other companies and service providers, say a cleaning company, an accounting company, a goods delivery company, and they provide an integrated solution for small businesses to, have like a one-stop service provider. So that's an integrated company. So we see integration as, in the context of DID, where you are as a system working together from alter to alter to manage your whole life. Alter A handles this part of life, alter B handles another part of life, and that is integration. Fusion, on the other hand, is where we define it as two different alters merging into one and becoming one alter, or in some cases multiple alters can fuse into one alter. That is fusion to us. The next terminology, alter versus part versus identity. So some systems we know prefer the terminology to use for them, alter. Some systems prefer to call them parts. And these two are the most common terminologies that I've heard in the community. And if you find alter or part a really hard to use terminology for you, usually because you're not a system, I think the least you could do is call them identities, which is why it's called dissociative identity disorders. And don't say personalities, don't say with multiple personalities, because it draws back into the previous naming of the disorder called multiple personality disorder, and it's fragmentation of the whole personality of that one personality. So each alter isn't multiple personalities, if that makes sense. The next terminology: fronting, co-fronting, and co-consciousness. Oh yeah, and also inside or at the back. So fronting is the alter having executive control of the body. The fronting alter have access to the legs and arms, the head, the body, everything. Alright, so co-fronting is when two or more alters are at the front at the same time with executive control of the body at the same time. One analogy I can provide would be, in commercial aircraft there are two pilots in the flight deck. One is, controlling the flight yoke, and the other pilot is, flipping switches, on the overhead board, or, communicating with ATC on the radio, adjusting, or turning on and off the strobe lights of the plane, landing lights, deploying the landing gear. So both are flying the plane, they're just, operating different stuff in the plane. And you translate that into DID. So in our case, say me and my prime protector are working together, we are co-fronting. I would usually be the one socializing with my passengers. So I'm in charge of the verbalization, I'm in control of the body's mouth, but Sage is the one controlling the steering wheel and the pedals of the car. So we have different roles at the same time in that given moment, but we're controlling different parts of the body, and that's co-fronting. Now, co-consciousness. The way we define co-consciousness, again, different systems may have different terms, and that is okay. So co-consciousness is where an alter is quite near to the front and is able to experience all the five senses of whoever is at the front. They can see stuff, they could hear stuff, they can feel what the body is feeling in terms of touch, and they could smell what the body is smelling, but they do not have any control of the body, no control to their arms, no control to the legs, no control of the head or the eyes. And that to us is co-consciousness. And that is also a bit different for us, like there are alters that's way back in headspace where they could see and hear such things, because in our headspace we have a television that alters not fronting could see and pick at the outside world and see what is happening. But they aren't able to smell or feel textures, whatever. So to us that is not co-consciousness. It's just the unique way our headspace works. Lastly, at the back or inside. So terms like these describe alters who are not actively at the front, not conscious, just sleeping headspace or doing something else in headspace. No awareness of what's going on in the outside world. And that's what it means to be at the back or inside. The next point I like to bring up is flashbacks versus blind flashbacks. Flashbacks are described as reliving the moment as if it's happening again, usually reserved for traumatic memories, since we believe in traumagenic systems. It feels like everything is happening all over again as if it's real, and it could make us really afraid and all the trauma responses come back. Blind flashbacks, on the other hand, is a situation where you don't really see stuff or visualize stuff as compared to flashbacks where it really appears in front of you, but you have that same emotional response as if that traumatic event is replaying again, but it's all emotions, all sensations. So it's both emotions and perhaps for some physical sensations. So say you were physically abused in the past before, you could suddenly feel all the physical pain all over again as if it's happening again, but you're not seeing stuff. That is a blind flashback.
Through the wastelands, through the highways.
Right, the next point, distressed alters. So in our previous video, we did talk about that you don't trigger another alter unless it's explicitly okay. It's explicitly mentioned by the system that you are allowed to trigger another alter, and usually in such cases, one of the first alters that most systems would present to you is their protector and how to trigger out their protector for safety reasons. So in my case, when I get close to somebody and they know we're a system, I'll tell them, Sage, our prime protector, likes this song. If you see us in a distressed state, if maybe a new alter comes to the front or a very previously dormant alter comes to the front and they feel lost and they don't want to continue fronting, please play this song in front of us. It will trigger Sage, our prime protector, so that Sage could jump to the front and take control of the situation. So that's what I want to say about this topic, about distress alters. So I guess that's where ethics or morals maybe come to place. And if it's a really dire situation where you're not given permission to trigger another alter, but you're not given permission to trigger another alter, but their protector likes a certain thing, and it's in their best interest to trigger their protector out, then this might arguably be an ethical move. But that's solely my opinion. Alright, so this is about littles. Littles are defined by us as alters with a mental age of between 0 to 9. So in DID, littles are not exactly the same as actual kids in people without DID. The reason is this: it's their mental state and level of maturity. So they have a mental stage, or words are hard, mental age of between 0 to 9. However, because the body is probably an adult, this little might come with an adult level of knowledge and experience in life. It's just their mental state and maturity levels might resemble somebody that is between the ages of 0 to 9. So regarding abilities of DID littles, it's important not to disregard some of their abilities that may be adult in nature. So in this case, in my system, We have littles who have the mental age of between 4 to 6. And in most typical cases, you wouldn't allow an actual 4 to 6-year-old kid to go out buying groceries, for the family. Because, they might get into trouble or not know how to defend themselves. However, it depends from system to system and alter to alter. Like our littles, mostly, especially this age 4 to 6 little, she knows how to head out on her own to buy groceries. And we let that happen by being either co-front or co-consciousness. So we observe her and make sure she could do it by herself, and we are like on standby to step in if anything bad happens. So it's like our kid under supervision. And after a while, she gained our trust that she can do adult things, like buying groceries. So some of the compromises that we gave her is like, if you help us buy groceries, you can add this candy, your favorite candy from the shelf, to the basket, So they are still kids by mental age. So, you need these little kiddie rewards given to them. A bit cute, I know. So the other point I want to mention, because their maturity and mental age might be that low, they would typically, not in all cases, but typically like kid stuff and talk or act like a kid. Right, so the last point I'd like to talk about is privacy between alters. Going by traumagenic theory, I could give a very good example. So, because DID is compartmentalization of the brain due to traumatic memories and experiences, just to keep, the body functioning in life, not to be constantly bothered by traumatic memories. So if a traumatic alter, or rather a trauma holder, comes to you and shares all their, past bodily traumas, and then another alter funds, it is not okay to just say, hey, I saw so-and-so alter come to the front and they told me blah 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 happens when you're age 5. And then the other alter like, what happened to me? Oh, that's so sad. I feel like shit now, blah blah blah. It's not okay. Don't do that. Leave these things to therapy. You're not their therapist. So don't start to mix alters memories with one another unless the system themselves tell you that it's okay to do so. And it really depends on on a case by case basis. It depends on which alter, how trustworthy is that alter, how mature is that alter. So consult the system's protector or gatekeeper. That's one of the better ways to seek consent or clarity regarding sharing of information across alters, because their duties are to protect the system. So that should be a good start. Right, so we have come to the end of the What is DID video series of 2 episodes. I'm sorry that it took so long for us to release this video, and that this video is so long, but I prefer to, me as an author, Averia as an author, I prefer to be more genuine and take my time to share actual examples of my experience being a DID system. So that is why this video is so long. But if you really stayed all the way to the end, I would like to say a big thank you. Thank you for staying, because it took a very long time for us to prepare this, to record this, and to do all the editing before releasing it on YouTube. So if you like our channel and want more content on DID and ASD, Please do like this video, subscribe, hit the hit the bell icon. What icon is that? Enable notifications, and do participate in comments below. We will do our best to respond, and your participation is really appreciated. And thank you so much, and see you in our next video. Bye.